Guys, welcome back to my channel. We are still talking about Charmer's deck, but we are specifically talking on today's video about these four cards right here. Now, the Charmer deck has certain engines and certain monsters that work in certain ways. These four monsters are your spellcaster support, and in some ways they are a vital engine to your Charmer's deck. Now, I'm new to this Charmer's deck also. I got this Charmer's deck about a couple months ago, and it's been out for about a year. And most of these cards have been around for a while now. So I'm barely learning this deck, and most of my misplays that I have on this deck are because of these four cards right here. They do so much and they have so much potential, and it's very hard to manage them because they have very specific conditions in which they can be activated. Now, if you are not familiar, these four animals are associated with your Charmers. This one is associated to the Wind Charmer, this one's the Fire Charmer, the Water Charmer, and the Earth Charmer. Now, you can normal summon each one of these cards if you control a spellcaster monster, meaning you normal summon or you have a spellcaster on the field. You can special summon each one of these cards out of your hand for free, basically, just by controlling a spellcaster monster, which in my opinion is one of the most craziest special summonings that I have seen so far. So let me give you an example in the making. Let's say you draw 5 cards. One is a spellcaster. You see how it's the Earth? And it has the Nefarious on there, right there. That's the Earth and the Nefarious. This also has a Charmer. So, let's say you normal summon a spellcaster. That now allows you to special summon every single one of these monsters right here. This is why it's so important to know about these monsters. The crazy thing about it is that I have seen so many decks that play Charmers. Actually, they don't even play Charmers. They play the familiars. And they do not include these monster supports. Now, there's so much to be said about these monsters. Number one, we're going to focus on just these 4 monsters right here. And this little engine. Each one of these monsters, you can only control one at a time. Each specific monster. Meaning you can only have one of these on the field, one of these on the field, one of these, and one of these. But you could have all 4 at the same time. But you cannot have 3 Nefarious, or 3 Inari, or 3 Ranryu, or 3 Gigabyte. You can only have one of each during any given time, because you can only control one. Now let's say you have your spellcaster, right? And you have your Nefarious, right? And it's your turn. And for some reason they pop your Nefarious. You could, if it's your main phase or your second main phase, you could still special summon this card right here, even though this one got popped. Because you can control one at a time. But let's say you have a spellcaster. You can't special summon 2 of them, because you could only control one at a time. So, that is one trick with these right here. So you can only control one of these monsters at a time. So if you have 3 of them in your hand, that's almost a brick, but it's still pretty good to have that, just in case something happens to one of yours, and you can activate it right away. Now, if these cards go to the graveyard, they have a graveyard effect that activates under certain conditions, except for this one right here. This one's graveyard effect activates regardless whether it was in the field or not, or any condition happened. It says right here on the second sentence, actually the third sentence, once per turn during your opponent's end phase. That's very important. During your opponent's end phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one face-up monster you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon this card. Now that is very important because this is the only monster that, let's say you have a card where you have to discard something. If you discard this monster, its graveyard effect activates. But if you discard this monster from your hand or from your deck, its graveyard effect does not activate. We'll talk about these graveyard effects later on. What you got to learn is that this one right here can be activated whether you discard it from your hand, whether it's on the field, whether it's destroyed by card effect, whether it's sent from your deck to the graveyard. This one is the only effect that activates regardless of anything. Now these other ones right here have to be on the field, and they have to be destroyed by either a card effect or by battle for these things to activate. Most specifically, this one can only activate if it's destroyed by card effect and sent to the graveyard. But if it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, it does not activate. So those are the three conditions you need for these right here. Now these two have to be on the field. These two have to be on the field, and they have to be destroyed by card effect or by battle in order for their graveyard effect to activate. Okay. So once your Nefarious is in the graveyard, you can now do certain things. Let's say you have all these, right? And it's your opponent's turn. And your opponent knocks out two of your cards. And your Nefarious is in your graveyard. Depending on how it knocked out this card, let's say it destroyed this one by battle, its effect is dead in the graveyard. So it will not activate. So let's say it destroyed both of these by battle. Okay? And then you're left with these, right? And your opponent says, all right, end turn. When your opponent says end turn, this is the only time you can activate this card in your graveyard. So you see, once per turn during your opponent's end phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one face-up monster you control and destroy it. So before you draw a card, it's your turn. And before you draw a card, you have to activate this effect. When your opponent says end phase, you say, okay, chain this card to your end phase. We're going to destroy Gigabyte. I'm going to destroy Gigabyte, and I'm going to special summon this in your end phase, right? So we are in this opponent's end phase. Now that we have done that in this end phase, we can now activate Gigabyte's graveyard activation, right? Or effect. It says when this card is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one monster with 1500 attack, 200 defense from your deck, except Gigabyte. So, since you destroyed that monster, you could now special summon from your deck a card with the same attack and defense. Now, only these four cards have the same attack and defense, and you can only control one card of each. So which card are you going to bring from your deck you're going to bring Inari from your deck. Because you cannot bring Nefarious, you cannot bring Ran Ryu because they're here, and you can't bring Gigabyte. So depending on which one you're missing, you can bring, before you draw, you can pull an Inari and special summon Inari. Let's say then let's say you shuffled your deck, and now it's still your opponent's end phase. Now you can draw. So now it's your draw phase. Boom. And that's how that one trick works. It's a little complicated, but that's how you work the Gigabyte. Now, this is a little different scenario right here. Let's say you have these right here. Your go-to is going to be this guy right here. Let's say it's your opponent's turn, and he destroyed these 3 monsters right here. These 3. Now, let's say he destroyed this one he destroyed all of them by battle. Now you have this one that can activate, and then you can activate this one later on. So whatever you want to do, he destroyed this one by battle. You can now special summon whichever monster you want that has 1500 attack, 200 defense, as long as you don't control it. Now let's do fire. So we could even do fire again. So Gigabyte special summons Inari Fire. Now what you can do is, let's say it's still your opponent's turn and he destroyed that, and then you special summon these 2, and now you're left with these 2, and your opponent says end turn. Now you can activate this one, even though it was your opponent's turn. You special summon this one. You could now destroy Ren Ryu and activate Ren Ryu's effect, which says, this card destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard. You can target one monster, 1500 attack, 200 defense from your graveyard, except Ren Ryu. What we're going to do is we're going to pull Gigabyte. Then we're going to draw. And boom. We have 3 of these. So these are very hard to destroy, and they all have their specific conditions. So these are an important engine in your Charmers deck. So that's basically what you need to learn about those 4 cards right there. And hopefully you do not do any misplays like I have before with these cards. One of my problems was that it was hard to remember that this one can only be activated if it's on the field and destroyed by card effect. Then it could activate. Now let's say your opponent destroyed it by a card effect. Let's say they did a Regeki, right? And they destroyed it. They destroyed all of them. Well, they can now all activate during the thing. This Gigabyte can bring back whatever you want from here. Gigabyte can return something from your deck. Ren Ryu can return something from your graveyard. And then this one can summon, and if this was not in there, it can summon itself from your graveyard during your next standby phase. So let's say this was not activated, and it's your next standby phase. Your opponent destroyed this by Regeki, and then its end phase, and then now it's your standby phase. So first you draw, and then in your standby phase, you can special summon this card. So it's very hard to get rid of all these cards. That's why it's important to learn these cards and play them properly and use them in combos so that you can be better at your Charmers deck. Because one thing is having a Charmers deck, the other thing is knowing how to play it. So that's why you need to practice, and you need to know your cards, and you need to read them specifically, because one word or another can cause you to misplay or not. So hopefully you learned something from this. In one of my other videos, we're going to talk about the awakening monsters. Once I get the awakening for the water, once I get awakening for water monsters, we're going to be talking about that. But every one of these monsters has an awakening. And these are it right here. So we're going to talk about these awakening monsters when I get the water monster awakening, which will probably be in about less than a week. So each one of these monsters has a respective awakening monster, and those are it right there. See if you could see it. That's its awakening, that's its awakening, and that's this awakening. And Gigabyte also has an awakening, but I have to wait till I get that. So we're going to be talking about that as soon as I get that other one. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys love Charmers, this is my deck right now, and I'm kind of committed to it. I don't just play Yu-Gi-Oh! I play all TCGs except for Pokemon. But maybe even if I learn Pokemon TCG, I'll even play that. So if you like booster pack openings, I do that on my TikTok. And it's the same as this channel, Tomoko Gaming. So just look at Tomoko Gaming in TikTok. And I have card openings and structure deck openings on that, and I'll see you guys in another video.